The morning mist clung to the manicured gardens of Windsor Castle like a delicate shroud, transforming the ancient grounds into something almost otherworldly. Sergeant Thomas Mitchell adjusted his ceremonial helmet, the weight of it familiar after 12 years of service to the Crown. His polished boots clicked against the stone pathway as he made his rounds, a sound that had become as natural as breathing. Thomas had always prided himself on being invisible when necessary, visible when required. It was the unspoken rule of royal protection, to see everything while appearing to see nothing, to hear all while remaining deaf to private conversations. Today felt different somehow, though he couldn't quite place why. The air itself seemed charged with an unusual energy that made him more alert than usual. As he approached the east terrace, Thomas noticed movement through the tall French windows of the morning room. The Princess of Wales, Catherine, stood silhouetted against the pale morning light, her posture rigid with what appeared to be barely contained emotion. She was dressed simply in a cream cashmere sweater and dark trousers, her hair pulled back in a way that suggested she had dressed quickly, without her usual attention to public presentation. Thomas had been assigned to Catherine's security detail numerous times over the years. He had observed her evolution from the nervous young woman who had married into the royal family to the confident, poised princess she had become. But, this morning, something in her stance reminded him of those earlier days when uncertainty had clouded her features. Through his peripheral vision, Thomas caught sight of another figure entering the morning room. Princess Anne strode in with her characteristic no-nonsense gait, wearing her customary riding attire, jodhpurs, boots, and a practical jacket that had seen better days. The Princess Royal had never been one for fashion or ceremony when comfort and functionality would suffice. The contrast between the two women was striking. Catherine, younger by more than 2 decades, possessed an ethereal beauty that photographers never tired of capturing. Anne, weathered by years of outdoor pursuits and public service, carried herself with the confidence of someone who had long ago stopped caring about public opinion of her appearance. Thomas positioned himself at his designated post near the garden entrance, close enough to respond to any security concern but far enough to provide the illusion of privacy. The royal family had learned to conduct their personal conversations as if their guards were pieces of furniture, present but not truly there. It was a skill born of necessity and years of practice. The conversation inside the morning room began quietly. Thomas couldn't make out specific words, but the tone suggested something serious was being discussed. Catherine's voice rose and fell in measured cadences, while Anne's responses came in shorter, more clipped sentences. This was typical for the Princess Royal, who had never been one for lengthy explanations or emotional displays. A peacock cried out from somewhere in the gardens, its harsh call cutting through the morning stillness. Thomas had never grown accustomed to the sound, finding it somehow mournful despite the bird's magnificent plumage. The grounds of Windsor were home to many such creatures, remnants of centuries when exotic animals were symbols of royal power and prestige. Inside the morning room, Catherine had moved to the window. Thomas could see her profile clearly now, noting the tension in her jaw and the way her fingers worried at her wedding ring, a habit he had observed during previous moments of stress. The morning light revealed dark circles beneath her eyes, suggesting sleepless nights that her public appearances never betrayed. Princess Anne joined Catherine at the window, standing close enough that their conversation became more intimate, more urgent. Thomas noticed how Anne's usually stern expression had softened, her weathered hands moving in small gestures as she spoke. The Princess Royal was known for her brusque manner and impatience with emotional displays, but, with Catherine, she seemed different, more maternal, more protective. The garden stretched out before them, a masterpiece of landscape architecture that had been refined over generations. Ancient oaks stood sentinel over precisely maintained flower beds, while gravel pathways curved and twisted in patterns designed to please royal eyes. Thomas had walked these paths countless times, in all seasons and weather, but he never failed to appreciate their beauty. A groundskeeper appeared in the distance, pushing a wheelbarrow filled with autumn leaves. The man worked with the quiet efficiency of someone who understood that his labor contributed to something larger than himself. Thomas felt a kinship with the groundskeeper. Both were servants in their own way, both essential yet invisible parts of the machinery that kept the royal household functioning. Catherine's voice carried more clearly now, though Thomas still couldn't discern specific words. There was pain in her tone, a vulnerability that she rarely allowed the public to see. The Princess of Wales had mastered the art of royal composure, but, here, in this private moment with Anne, her guard was down. And responded with what sounded like practical advice, her voice taking on the authoritative tone she used when addressing equestrian pupils or charity workers. The Princess Royal had never married for love the first time, having chosen duty and compatibility over passion. Her second marriage to Timothy Lawrence had been different, quieter, more genuine, based on mutual respect and understanding rather than royal expectations. Thomas wondered if Anne was drawing on her own experiences to counsel Catherine. The Princess Royal had navigated decades of public scrutiny, personal disappointments, and the constant pressure of royal duty. She had emerged stronger and more self-possessed, but not without scars that only those closest to her could see. The conversation inside seemed to reach a crucial point. Catherine's shoulders began to shake, though whether from anger, frustration, or sorrow, Thomas couldn't tell. And moved closer, her hand reaching out in what appeared to be a gesture of comfort. The Princess Royal was not known for physical demonstrations of affection, making this moment all the more significant. A delivery van rumbled up the drive, breaking the morning stillness. Thomas automatically shifted his position to maintain his sightlines while accommodating the interruption. The driver, a middle-aged man in a crisp uniform, seemed nervous about entering the grounds of Windsor Castle. Thomas made a mental note to coordinate with the other guards to ensure the delivery proceeded smoothly without disturbing the royal conversation. Inside the morning room, the two women seemed oblivious to the outside activity. Their conversation had reached an intensity that made everything else fade into background noise. Catherine appeared to be explaining something important, her hands gesturing emphatically as she spoke. And listened with the focused attention she usually reserved for matters of state or serious equestrian discussions. The morning light continued to shift and change, casting new shadows across the room. Thomas had learned to read these subtle changes over his years of service, understanding how the movement of sun and clouds could affect both security sightlines and the mood of those within the castle walls. Today, the light seemed particularly dramatic, creating a chiaroscuro effect that emphasized the emotional weight of the conversation taking place inside. A text message buzzed on Thomas's secure communication device. A routine update from Central Command, confirming the day's schedule and security arrangements. He acknowledged receipt with a brief response, his fingers moving quickly over the small keypad. These constant check-ins were part of the invisible network that protected the royal family, a web of communication and coordination that the public never saw. Catherine had moved away from the window, beginning to pace the length of the morning room. Her movement was restless, almost agitated, as if she couldn't contain the energy of whatever emotion was driving her. And remained by the window, watching her younger relative with an expression that seemed to mix concern with calculation. The Princess Royal was processing what she was hearing, formulating her response with the care of someone who understood the weight of her words. The morning room itself was a study in understated elegance. Cream-colored walls provided a neutral backdrop for carefully chosen artwork, while comfortable furniture invited intimate conversation. Fresh flowers, roses from the castle gardens, added splashes of color and their subtle fragrance to the space. It was a room designed for private family moments, away from the formal reception areas where public business was conducted. Thomas noticed movement in an upper window of the castle. Another guard, making his own rounds, paused briefly to acknowledge Thomas's presence with a subtle nod before continuing on his way. The security detail operated like a well-oiled machine, each member aware of the other's positions and responsibilities without need for constant communication. Inside the morning room, Anne had begun speaking again. Her voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to command, but Thomas detected an underlying gentleness that few people ever heard from the Princess Royal. Anne was known for her direct manner and impatience with what she considered frivolous concerns, but, with Catherine, she seemed to be exercising unusual patience and care. The peacock cried out again, its call echoing off the castle walls. Thomas glanced toward the sound, noting the bird's position near the Queen's garden. The peacocks were beautiful creatures, but they could be temperamental and occasionally aggressive during mating season. Another layer of complexity in maintaining security at a location where nature and protocol intersected in sometimes unpredictable ways. Catherine had stopped pacing and returned to the window. Standing beside Anne, she appeared smaller, more fragile than her public image suggested. The Princess of Wales had grown into her role with grace and determination, but moments like this revealed the human being beneath the carefully constructed public persona. Thomas felt a protective instinct toward her, the same feeling that had driven him to pursue a career in royal protection. The conversation between the two women had taken on a different quality, less urgent, more reflective, and appeared to be sharing something personal, her usual reserve giving way to what looked like genuine emotional connection. The Princess Royal was known for her dry wit and practical approach to life's challenges, but she was also capable of deep loyalty and affection for those who earned her respect. A gardener appeared near the morning room windows, tending to a flower bed with the methodical care that characterized all the castle's groundskeeping. The man worked quietly, aware that royals might be watching from the windows but focused on his task. Thomas recognized him as James, a longtime employee who had served the royal family for over 20 years. James understood the unspoken rules about discretion and privacy that governed all castle staff. The morning was advancing, and Thomas knew that both women would soon need to attend to their official duties. Catherine had a charity engagement in London, while Anne was scheduled to visit a writing school in the afternoon. The demands of royal life waited for no one, not even moments of personal crisis or family support. Inside the morning room, the conversation appeared to be reaching some kind of resolution. Catherine's posture had relaxed slightly, though tension still lingered in her shoulders, and maintained her position by the window, solid and reassuring like the castle walls themselves. The Princess Royal had always been the steadiest member of the royal family, the one others turned to when storms threatened to overwhelm them. Thomas checked his watch, noting the time and making a mental calculation about when he would need to prepare for the transition to the next phase of the day's security arrangements. His training had taught him to think several moves ahead, anticipating needs and potential complications before they arose. It was this attention to detail that had earned him his current position and the trust of his superiors. The sunlight streaming through the morning room windows had grown stronger, burning away the last traces of morning mist. The gardens were fully revealed now in their autumn glory, a tapestry of gold and crimson leaves that would soon give way to winter's stark beauty. Thomas had seen this cycle many times during his years of service, finding comfort in the predictable rhythm of seasons even as the human dramas within the castle walls remained unpredictable. Catherine and Anne continued their conversation, two women from different generations united by their commitment to the crown and their genuine affection for each other. The relationship between them had evolved over the years from formal courtesy to something approaching genuine friendship, built on mutual respect and shared experience of royal life's unique challenges. The weight of tradition and expectation pressed down on every member of the royal family, but some bore it more easily than others. Anne had been born to it, shaped by it from childhood, while Catherine had married into it as an adult with her own hopes and dreams. Their different perspectives seemed to complement each other in moments like this, offering both practical wisdom and emotional understanding. Thomas remained at his post, a silent guardian of not just their physical safety but also their privacy. In a world where every royal moment seemed destined for public consumption, these quiet instances of genuine human connection were precious and rare. They reminded him why his service mattered, why the protection he provided was about more than just preventing physical harm. The morning moved forward, carrying with it the promise of another day in the life of the royal family. But, for now, in this moment suspended between private pain and public duty, two women found strength in each other's presence, their conversation a bridge between vulnerability and the resilience required for their extraordinary lives. The tension in the morning room had shifted, becoming something more complex than simple distress. Thomas watched as Catherine pressed her palms against the window glass, leaving brief impressions that quickly faded. Her breath fogged the pain as she spoke in hushed, urgent tones that carried the weight of carefully guarded secrets. And stood with military precision, her back straight and hands clasped behind her. The Princess Royal had served in the Royal Navy and carried herself with the bearing of someone who had never forgotten that training. Yet her weathered face showed an expression Thomas had rarely witnessed, genuine concern mixed with protective anger. The photographs, Catherine's voice carried just enough for Thomas to catch fragments. They have photographs. Thomas felt his pulse quicken. In his years of service, he had learned to recognize the signs of a genuine security threat versus routine royal drama. The mention of photographs, combined with Catherine's obvious distress, triggered his professional instincts. He subtly shifted his position to better monitor the room while maintaining his apparent focus on the gardens. Anne's response was swift and decisive, her voice dropping to the commanding tone she used during crisis situations. Thomas had heard that voice before, during a security incident 3 years earlier when protesters had breached the outer perimeter during a garden party. The Princess Royal had taken charge then, coordinating with security while maintaining absolute calm. A maintenance worker wheeled a cart of tools past Thomas's position, nodding respectfully as he headed toward the castle's service entrance. The man's presence provided perfect cover for Thomas to adjust his communication earpiece without drawing attention. He needed to ensure he could hear any emergency signals while remaining focused on the developing situation inside. Through the window, Thomas observed Catherine pulling out what appeared to be her personal mobile phone. Her hands trembled slightly as she scrolled through messages, her face growing paler with each screen she viewed. Anne moved closer, reading over Catherine's shoulder with the practiced ease of someone accustomed to processing information quickly under pressure. The Princess Royal's expression darkened. Her jaw tightened in a way that Thomas recognized from public events when unwelcome questions were asked by persistent journalists. Anne had perfected the art of controlled fury over decades of dealing with media intrusion, but this seemed different, more personal, more immediate. When? Anne's voice carried clearly through the glass, sharp with urgency. Catherine's response was lost in a whisper, but her body language spoke volumes. She sank into one of the morning room's comfortable chairs, suddenly, looking much younger than her years. The confident, poised Princess of Wales seemed to crumble before Thomas's eyes, revealing the vulnerable woman beneath the carefully constructed public image. Thomas had witnessed this transformation before, though not often. During private family moments, when the cameras weren't recording and the public wasn't watching, the royals showed their humanity. It was a privilege of his position, but also a burden. He carried the knowledge of their private struggles while maintaining the fiction that they were somehow above ordinary human concerns. Anne began pacing, her riding boots clicking against the polished wooden floor with military precision. The Princess Royal was processing information, formulating a plan with the tactical thinking that had made her successful in competitive equestrian sports. She approached problems systematically, breaking them down into manageable components. A delivery van pulled up the service road, its presence drawing Thomas's attention to a potential security concern. He recognized the company, a high-end catering service that regularly provided for royal events. The driver seemed familiar, someone who had made deliveries before and understood the protocols. Still, Thomas made a mental note to verify the delivery with the household staff. Inside the morning room, Anne had stopped pacing and was now standing directly in front of Catherine. The Princess Royal's posture suggested she was delivering information or instructions that required Catherine's full attention. Their conversation had taken on the quality of a briefing, with Anne clearly in the role of advisor or strategist. Catherine nodded slowly, her color beginning to return as she absorbed whatever Anne was telling her. The Princess of Wales had shown remarkable resilience during her years in the royal family, adapting to challenges that would have overwhelmed many others. Thomas had watched her navigate scandals, family conflicts, and intense public scrutiny with growing confidence and skill. The morning light had shifted again, creating dramatic patterns across the room's elegant furnishings. Ancient tapestries caught and held the sunlight, their rich colors seeming to glow within her fire. The morning room had witnessed centuries of royal conversations, private moments of triumph and crisis that shaped the monarchy's evolution. Anne pulled out her own phone, a practical device that looked utilitarian compared to the latest models. The Princess Royal had never embraced technology for its own sake, preferring tools that served specific purposes. She began typing with surprising speed for someone of her generation, her messages clearly urgent and important. Thomas noticed movement in the castle's upper floors, other security personnel making their rounds, maintaining the invisible network that protected the royal family. A brief hand signal from a colleague in a distant window confirmed that all sectors were secure. The morning's tension hadn't spread beyond the immediate situation in the morning room. Catherine stood and moved to a sideboard where tea service had been laid out earlier. Her movements were more controlled now, as if the conversation with Anne had provided her with a framework for managing the crisis. She poured tea with steady hands, the familiar ritual seeming to center her emotionally. The Princess Royal accepted the cup with a brief nod, continuing her phone conversation with whoever she had contacted. Anne's connections spanned decades and included people in positions of influence throughout British society. Thomas suspected she was calling in favors or seeking advice from trusted allies who understood the delicate balance of royal reputation and media management. A groundskeeper appeared near the windows, raking leaves with methodical precision. The man worked with the quiet efficiency that characterized all castle staff, aware that his labor contributed to the perfect presentation that the public expected from royal residences. Thomas recognized him as William, a longtime employee whose discretion was absolute. Anne concluded her phone call and turned her full attention back to Catherine. The Princess Royal's expression had hardened into something resembling battle readiness. Thomas had seen that look before, during public engagements when unexpected challenges arose. Anne faced problems head-on, with a directness that sometimes surprised those who underestimated her. "They want money," Catherine's voice carried more clearly now, anger replacing some of the fear. "Quite a lot of money." Thomas felt his training kick in more fully. Blackmail attempts against the royal family were serious security matters that required immediate attention from appropriate authorities. He began mentally reviewing protocols while maintaining his external composure. The situation was escalating beyond family drama into potential criminal activity. Anne's response was swift and decisive. Thomas caught fragments of her words, references to lawyers, security consultants, and what sounded like investigative specialists. The Princess Royal was mobilizing resources with the efficiency of someone who had dealt with similar situations before. The peacock's cry echoed across the gardens again, somehow more mournful than before. Thomas found himself wondering if the birds could sense the emotional tension emanating from the castle. Animals often picked up on human stress in ways that seemed almost supernatural. Catherine had returned to the window, her teacup cradled in both hands as if its warmth could anchor her against the storm she was facing. The Princess of Wales had always been photographed extensively, her every public appearance scrutinized for fashion choices, facial expressions, and body language. The idea that private moments had been captured without her knowledge must have been particularly violating. And joined Catherine at the window again, their reflection ghost-like in the glass. Two women, separated by a generation but united by their shared experience of life under the most intense public scrutiny imaginable. The Princess Royal had weathered numerous scandals during her decades of service, emerging stronger and more determined each time. "The children," Catherine whispered, and Thomas felt his stomach tighten. Threats involving the young royals automatically elevated any security situation to the highest priority levels. He began calculating response times for various emergency protocols while maintaining his outward calm. Anne's hand found Catherine's shoulder, a gesture of support that spoke volumes about their relationship. The Princess Royal was not known for physical demonstrations of affection, making this moment of comfort all the more significant. Her withered face showed an expression of fierce protectiveness that reminded Thomas of a mother defending her young. The delivery van had completed its business and was departing, but not before the driver cast a curious glance toward the morning room windows. Thomas made another mental note about the man's behavior, adding it to the growing list of security considerations generated by the morning's events. Inside the room, Anne had pulled out a notepad and was writing with quick, efficient strokes. The Princess Royal approached crises like military campaigns, gathering intelligence, assessing resources, and developing strategic responses. Her notes would likely become the foundation for whatever action plan she was formulating. Catherine walked to another window, one that offered a different view of the grounds. From this angle, she could see the long walk stretching toward the Great Park, that magnificent avenue where royal processions had traveled for centuries. The sight seemed to remind her of something larger than her immediate crisis, the continuity of the monarchy and her role within it. A text message alert chimed from somewhere within the room. Both women tensed, understanding that communication could bring either salvation or fresh disaster. Anne checked her phone first, her expression remaining carefully neutral as she read whatever message had arrived. Thomas observed a subtle change in the Princess Royal's posture, a slight relaxation that suggested positive news. And showed the message to Catherine, whose visible relief confirmed Thomas's assessment. Whatever information they had received seemed to provide hope or at least a path forward. The morning was advancing toward the time when both women would need to prepare for their public commitments. Royal schedules were inflexible, planned months in advance and involving hundreds of people. Personal crises had to be managed around these obligations, adding another layer of complexity to an already difficult situation. Catherine began moving about the room with more purpose, gathering items and straightening her appearance. The transformation was remarkable. The fragile woman of earlier was being replaced by the composed Princess of Wales that the public knew. Thomas had witnessed this metamorphosis many times, always impressed by the royal family's ability to compartmentalize personal struggles. And was making another phone call, this one brief and to the point. Thomas caught only fragments, but the tone suggested she was issuing instructions or confirming arrangements. The Princess Royal's network of contacts and her decades of experience in crisis management were being brought to bear on Catherine's situation. The peacock appeared in view, strutting across the perfectly manicured lawn with magnificent arrogance. The bird's beauty was undeniable, but Thomas knew that peacocks could be aggressive and unpredictable. They served as an apt metaphor for the royal family itself, stunning to observe but potentially dangerous when threatened. Catherine returned to the window where her conversation with Anne had begun, but her demeanor was completely different now. The panic had been replaced by determination, the fear transformed into focused anger. The Princess of Wales was preparing for battle, drawing on reserves of strength that years of royal training had developed. Anne joined her one final time, and Thomas observed what appeared to be a strategic discussion between two allies preparing to face a common enemy. The Princess Royal's military bearing had intensified, while Catherine showed the poised confidence that had carried her through numerous public challenges. Their conversation was concluding, but Thomas sensed that this was merely the end of the first phase of whatever campaign Anne was organizing. The Princess Royal was not someone who accepted defeat, especially when family members were threatened. Her response would be swift, comprehensive, and likely devastating to whoever had made the mistake of targeting Catherine. The morning light was now streaming fully through the windows, burning away the last traces of mist and uncertainty. Whatever crisis had brought Catherine to Anne's attention was being addressed with typical royal efficiency, privately, decisively, and with access to resources that few people could imagine. As the two women prepared to leave the morning room, Thomas prepared for his own transition to the next phase of security coverage. The day would continue, the royal schedule would proceed as planned, but he now carried the knowledge that significant events were unfolding behind the scenes. His role was to remain vigilant, professional, and absolutely discreet about what he had witnessed. The royal family's ability to present a calm public face while managing private storms never ceased to amaze him. It was a skill born of necessity and, refined over generations, essential for maintaining the monarchy's stability in an age of constant media scrutiny and public skepticism. The transformation in Catherine's demeanor was complete by the time she and prepared to leave the morning room. Where Thomas had observed vulnerability and fear earlier, he now saw the steely determination that had helped the Princess of Wales navigate years of intense public scrutiny. Anne's influence was unmistakable. The Princess Royal possessed an almost supernatural ability to instill confidence in those around her during moments of crisis. Thomas watched as Catherine gathered her personal items with practiced efficiency. Her movements had regained their usual grace, and the tremor in her hands had disappeared entirely. The Princess of Wales was once again in control of herself, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. It was a remarkable transformation that spoke to both her inner strength and skill as a mentor and advisor. And checked her watch with the precision of someone whose entire life operated according to strict schedules. The Princess Royal's day was typically packed with engagements, meetings, and responsibilities that left little room for spontaneous crises. Yet she had made time for Catherine's situation, treating it with the seriousness it clearly deserved. "The photographs won't see daylight," Anne's voice carried clearly through the window, confident and absolute. "I'll make certain of that." Thomas felt a chill of anticipation. The Princess Royal's connections and influence extended far beyond what most people realized. And had spent decades building relationships with media executives, security professionals, and legal experts who formed an invisible network capable of addressing threats to the royal family. When she made promises like this, she had the resources to keep them. Catherine nodded, her expression showing the kind of trust that could only develop through years of shared experience. The relationship between the two women had evolved far beyond formal courtesy or family obligation. They had become genuine allies, united by their commitment to protecting the monarchy and their families from those who would exploit private moments for public consumption. A maintenance crew appeared on the grounds, preparing for some routine repair work on the castle's exterior stonework. Thomas recognized the team leader, a craftsman who had been working on royal properties for over 15 years. The man's discretion was absolute. He had witnessed countless private moments during his years of service but had never betrayed that trust. The morning room's atmosphere had changed completely since Thomas's arrival. The tension that had been almost palpable earlier had been replaced by focused determination. Whatever crisis had brought Catherine to Anne's attention was being addressed with typical royal efficiency, systematically, privately, and with access to resources that few could imagine. Anne was making final notes in her leather-bound diary, a habit she had maintained for decades. The Princess Royal's organizational skills were legendary, and she approached every challenge with the methodical precision that had made her successful in competitive equestrian sports. These notes would become the foundation for whatever action plan she was implementing. Catherine had moved to a mirror near the door, making subtle adjustments to her appearance. The Princess of Wales understood that her public image was scrutinized constantly, and even the smallest detail could be interpreted and analyzed by media observers. Her ability to present a composed facade regardless of personal circumstances was one of her most valuable skills. Thomas noticed movement in the upper windows of the castle, other security personnel conducting their rounds while remaining alert to any unusual activity. The royal protection system operated like a well-coordinated machine, with each member aware of the other's positions and responsibilities. The morning's events had been contained within a very small circle of awareness. The peacock's cry echoed across the grounds again, but this time it seemed less mournful and more like a declaration of territory. The bird's magnificent plumage caught the morning sunlight as it strutted across the lawn with characteristic arrogance. Thomas found himself thinking that the peacock and the royal family shared certain qualities, both beautiful, both potentially dangerous when threatened, both essential elements of their respective environments. And concluded her phone consultation with what appeared to be a legal advisor or security specialist. The Princess Royal's expression showed satisfaction, suggesting that the conversation had been productive. She was mobilizing her network of contacts with the efficiency of someone who had managed similar crises before. They picked the wrong family to threaten, and said, her voice carrying the quiet confidence of someone who had never lost a battle that truly mattered. Catherine's smile in response was the first genuine expression of relief Thomas had witnessed since the morning began. The Princess of Wales was beginning to believe that the situation could be resolved without the devastating consequences she had initially feared. Anne's confidence was infectious, based on decades of successfully protecting the royal family from various threats and scandals. A delivery truck pulled up the service road, but this one was different from the morning's earlier arrival. This vehicle bore the discreet markings of a security company that Thomas recognized as one of the specialized firms employed by the royal household for sensitive situations. The driver was someone he knew by sight, a former police officer who now worked in private security. Thomas understood the significance of this arrival and was calling in professional resources to address whatever threat Catherine was facing. The Princess Royal didn't make empty promises, and her network of connections included some of the most capable security and investigative professionals in Britain. Whatever photographs or evidence the blackmailers possessed would soon be the subject of expert attention. Inside the morning room, both women were preparing for their departure. Catherine had regained her characteristic poise, while Anne maintained her military bearing. They moved with the synchronized efficiency of people who had worked together before and understood each other's methods and priorities. The grounds around them showed signs of the advancing day. Gardeners were beginning their work in earnest, maintaining the perfect presentation that visitors expected from royal properties. The morning mist had completely dissipated, revealing the gardens in their full autumn glory. Golden leaves drifted down from ancient trees, creating a carpet that would be meticulously maintained throughout the day. Thomas checked his secure communication device, noting updates from other security personnel stationed throughout the castle grounds. The morning's activities had been recorded and logged, but only in the most general terms. The specific details of Catherine and Anne's conversation would never appear in any official record. Anne was gathering her own belongings, a practical handbag, riding gloves, and the leather diary that went everywhere with her. The Princess Royal traveled light by royal standards, preferring functionality over ceremony in her personal effects. Her approach to crisis management was similarly streamlined, focused on practical solutions rather than elaborate protocols. Catherine had returned to the window one final time, looking out over the grounds that had provided the backdrop for their crucial conversation. The Princess of Wales seemed to be drawing strength from the sight of the perfectly maintained gardens and the ancient castle walls that had sheltered the royal family for generations. "Thank you," Catherine said quietly, the words carrying more weight than their simplicity suggested. Anne's response was characteristically brief and practical. "Family protects family. Always." Thomas felt moved by the simple declaration. Despite all the protocol, ceremony, and public attention that surrounded the royal family, moments like this revealed the human bonds that truly mattered. The Princess Royal's commitment to Catherine went far beyond duty or obligation. It was based on genuine affection and shared experience of the unique challenges they faced. The security truck had completed its business and was departing, but not before the driver exchanged brief words with Thomas's colleague stationed near the service entrance. Information was being gathered, resources were being deployed, and the invisible machinery of royal protection was responding to the threat with professional efficiency. And was making one final phone call, this one brief and decisive. Thomas caught only fragments, but the tone suggested she was confirming arrangements or issuing final instructions to someone in her network. The Princess Royal's ability to coordinate complex operations while maintaining her regular schedule was impressive. Catherine began walking toward the door, her movements signaling that their private conference was concluding. The Princess of Wales had been transformed from the frightened woman Thomas had observed earlier into someone ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Anne's influence had been decisive, providing both practical support and emotional strength. The peacock had disappeared from view, but its presence remained a reminder of the wild beauty that coexisted with human civilization at places like Windsor Castle. The royal residences were unique environments where nature and culture blended in carefully maintained harmony, creating settings that were both magnificent and slightly surreal. Thomas prepared for the transition to the next phase of his duties. Both women would soon be leaving for their respective engagements, requiring different security arrangements and protocols. His morning of observation would give way to more active protective responsibilities as they moved into public settings. The morning room would return to its usual quiet elegance, showing no signs of the dramatic conversation that had taken place within its walls. The royal family's ability to contain private crises while maintaining public schedules was one of their most essential skills, developed through generations of practice and necessity. Anne opened the door, ready to step back into her official role as the Princess Royal. Her transformation was as complete as Catherine's. The concerned family member was being replaced by the confident public figure that the world knew and respected. Both women understood that their private struggles could never be allowed to interfere with their public duties. As they prepared to leave the morning room, Thomas reflected on what he had witnessed. The morning had provided a rare glimpse into the human side of the royal family, showing how they supported each other during moments of genuine crisis. It reinforced his understanding of why his service mattered and why the protection he provided extended far beyond physical security. The castle around them continued its ancient rhythms, indifferent to human drama but providing a stable foundation for the lives lived within its walls. Windsor had witnessed centuries of royal conversations, some trivial and others that shaped the course of history. Today's discussion between Catherine and Anne would likely never be recorded in official histories, but its importance to both women was undeniable. Thomas remained at his post as they departed, maintaining his professional composure while processing everything he had observed. The morning's events would remain locked in his memory, another chapter in the ongoing story of his service to the crown. His discretion was absolute, his professionalism unquestionable, but his understanding of the people he protected had deepened considerably. The sun continued its climb toward midday, burning away the last traces of morning uncertainty. Whatever crisis had brought Catherine to seek Anne's counsel was being addressed with characteristic royal determination and efficiency. The day would proceed according to schedule, but significant changes were already in motion behind the scenes, guided by the Princess Royal's expert hand and unwavering commitment to protecting her family. The afternoon brought an unexpected return to Windsor Castle for both Catherine and Princess Anne. Thomas had been reassigned to interior security detail when word came that both women would be meeting again in the private library, a location that offered even greater privacy than the morning room. The urgency of their second meeting suggested that developments had occurred since their earlier conversation. Thomas positioned himself in the corridor outside the library, a vantage point that allowed him to monitor access while providing the royal family with the privacy they required. The library was one of the castle's most secure locations, filled with rare books and historical documents that required careful climate control and restricted access. Through the partially open door, Thomas could see that Anne had arrived first and was speaking quietly on her mobile phone. The Princess Royal's posture suggested the conversation was significant. She stood with military straightness while making notes in her leather diary. Her riding attire had been replaced by a dark business suit that lent her an even more authoritative appearance. Catherine arrived minutes later, moving with purposeful strides that contrasted sharply with her earlier distressed state. The Princess of Wales wore an elegant navy dress that projected confidence and control. Her transformation throughout the day had been remarkable, showing the inner strength that had served her well during years of intense public scrutiny. "The photographs have been secured," and announced without preamble as Catherine entered the library. Her voice carried the satisfaction of someone who had achieved a difficult objective through careful planning and decisive action. Thomas felt a wave of relief on Catherine's behalf. The Princess Royal's network of contacts and her decades of experience in crisis management had apparently proved successful once again. And possessed resources that few people could imagine, accumulated through years of building relationships with security professionals, legal experts, and media executives. Catherine's response was immediate and heartfelt. "How did you manage it so quickly?" Anne's explanation was methodical and precise, befitting her military training and systematic approach to problem-solving. Thomas caught references to digital forensics specialists, legal injunctions, and what sounded like direct intervention with the individuals who had obtained the photographs. The Princess Royal had mobilized an impressive array of resources in a remarkably short time. The library around them provided an appropriate setting for their discussion. Ancient leather-bound volumes lined the walls from floor to ceiling, while carefully positioned reading lamps cast warm pools of light throughout the space. The room had witnessed centuries of private royal consultations, planning sessions that had shaped both family decisions and matters of state. A soft knock at the door interrupted their conversation. Thomas stepped aside as a member of the household staff entered with a tea service, moving with the practiced discretion that characterized all castle employees. The woman set down the tray without speaking, understanding that her presence should be as invisible as possible during private royal conversations. And poured tea for both of them, her movements efficient and practical. The Princess Royal had never embraced the elaborate ceremonies that surrounded some aspects of royal life, preferring straightforward approaches to both social rituals and crisis management. Her success in resolving Catherine's situation reflected this no-nonsense methodology. "The financial demands have been addressed as well," and continued, her tone suggesting that this aspect of the threat had also been neutralized. Thomas wondered what resources the Princess Royal had brought to bear on the blackmailers, but he understood that some details would never be shared, even within the royal household's inner circle. Catherine's relief was visible in her posture and expression. The fear that had characterized her morning demeanor had been replaced by something approaching gratitude and admiration. The Princess of Wales had learned valuable lessons about both the threats she faced and the resources available to address them. Through the library windows, Thomas could see the castle grounds bathed in afternoon sunlight. The maintenance crews had completed their work, leaving the stonework and gardens in perfect condition for the evening's reception. The seamless continuation of royal life, even during moments of crisis, was one of the monarchy's most essential characteristics. Anne was reviewing her diary, checking off items and making additional notes about follow-up actions. The Princess Royal approached every challenge with the thoroughness that had made her successful in competitive sports and public service. Her crisis management system left nothing to chance and included contingency plans for various scenarios. The individuals involved have been warned about the consequences of any future actions, and said, her voice carrying the quiet authority that made her such an effective negotiator. Thomas understood that these warnings, coming from the Princess Royal, would be taken very seriously by anyone with sense. Catherine asked about the legal implications of the situation, showing the practical intelligence that had helped her adapt successfully to royal life. The Princess of Wales had learned to think strategically about challenges, understanding that immediate solutions often needed to be balanced against long-term consequences. Anne's response included references to precedent cases, legal protections available to the royal family, and preventive measures that could reduce the likelihood of similar situations developing in the future. The Princess Royal's knowledge of media law and privacy rights was extensive, accumulated through decades of dealing with intrusive coverage and legal challenges. The afternoon light streaming through the library windows created dramatic shadows among the book stacks. Thomas found himself thinking about the centuries of knowledge contained within these walls, diplomatic correspondence, family histories, legal documents that had shaped the evolution of the British monarchy. The current crisis, serious as it seemed, was merely the latest in a long series of challenges that the royal family had faced and overcome. A discreet chime from Anne's phone indicated an incoming message. The Princess Royal read it quickly, her expression showing satisfaction at whatever information she had received. Thomas suspected that her network of contacts was providing updates on the situation's resolution, confirming that all aspects of the threat had been properly addressed. The media contacts have agreed to our terms, and announced, sharing the message's contents with Catherine. There will be no coverage of any aspect of this situation. The story dies here. Catherine's response combined relief with curiosity about how one had managed to secure such comprehensive cooperation from media organizations. The Princess Royal's influence with editors and publishers was legendary, but even Thomas was impressed by the speed and completeness of her success. Anne's explanation revealed the extent of her media relationships and the respect she commanded throughout the industry. The Princess Royal had earned her reputation through decades of straight dealing, honoring agreements, and providing access when appropriate while maintaining firm boundaries about family privacy. Media executives understood that maintaining her trust was worth more than any individual story. The library's atmosphere had transformed completely since the beginning of their meeting. Where Thomas had initially sensed urgent concern, he now observed two women conducting what amounted to a debriefing session about a successfully completed operation. Catherine's education in crisis management was being advanced considerably through this experience. Anne closed her diary and put away her phone, gestures that suggested the immediate crisis had been fully resolved. The Princess Royal's systematic approach had addressed every aspect of the threat while establishing protections against future similar situations. Her effectiveness in these matters explained why family members consistently turned to her during difficult periods. Catherine stood and walked to one of the library windows, looking out over the grounds where Thomas had observed their morning conversation. The Princess of Wales seemed to be reflecting on the day's events and the lessons learned about both the vulnerability she faced and the resources available to address them. "I don't know how to thank you properly," Catherine said, her voice carrying genuine emotion. Anne's response was characteristically practical and brief. "You would do the same for any family member facing similar circumstances. That's how families survive challenges like these." Thomas was moved by the simple statement of mutual support and loyalty. Despite all the protocol and ceremony that surrounded royal life, moments like this revealed the human bonds that provided the monarchy's real foundation. The Princess Royal's commitment to Catherine extended far beyond duty or obligation. The afternoon was advancing toward evening, and Thomas knew that both women would soon need to prepare for their evening commitments. Royal schedules were typically inflexible, planned months in advance and involving hundreds of people whose own schedules depended on royal punctuality. Personal crises had to be managed efficiently to avoid disrupting these complex arrangements. Anne began gathering her belongings with the efficiency of someone whose entire life operated according to strict timetables. The Princess Royal's ability to address serious family crises while maintaining her regular commitments was remarkable, reflecting decades of practice in managing competing demands on her time and attention. Catherine remained by the window for a few moments longer, apparently savoring the view and the sense of resolution that Anne's intervention had provided. The Princess of Wales had faced a genuine threat to her family's privacy and security, but she had also learned valuable lessons about the resources available to address such challenges. The peacock appeared in the garden below, its magnificent plumage catching the afternoon light as it strutted across the perfectly maintained lawn. The bird's arrogant beauty seemed appropriate for the setting, another element in the carefully orchestrated presentation that characterized all royal residences. Anne was making final notes in her diary, documenting the day's events and, presumably, the actions taken to resolve the crisis. The Princess Royal's record-keeping was meticulous, providing a resource for handling similar situations in the future. Her institutional knowledge was invaluable to the royal family's security and crisis management capabilities. The security review will be completed by the end of the week, Anne announced, referring to what Thomas assumed was a comprehensive assessment of vulnerabilities that had been exposed by the day's events. The Princess Royal approached problems holistically, addressing not just immediate threats but underlying weaknesses that might create future difficulties. Catherine nodded her understanding, showing the kind of practical acceptance that had served her well throughout her years as a member of the royal family. The Princess of Wales had learned to balance emotional responses with strategic thinking, essential skills for surviving and thriving under constant public scrutiny. The library around them continued its ancient silence, absorbing another chapter in the ongoing story of royal life. The room had witnessed centuries of private consultations, family discussions, and strategic planning sessions. Today's meeting would never be recorded in official histories, but its significance for both women was undeniable. Thomas prepared for the transition to evening security arrangements. Both women would soon be leaving for separate engagements, requiring different protective protocols and coordination with multiple security teams. The day's crisis had been resolved, but the ongoing work of royal protection continued without pause. As they prepared to leave the library, Thomas reflected on what he had witnessed throughout the day. The morning's vulnerability and fear had been transformed into confidence and resolution through the Princess Royal's expert intervention. Anne's network of contacts and decades of crisis management experience had proved decisive in neutralizing a serious threat to the royal family. The afternoon sunlight was beginning to fade, casting longer shadows throughout the castle's corridors and rooms. Evening approached with its own rhythms and requirements, but the day's accomplishments provided a foundation of security and confidence that would serve both women well in facing whatever future challenges might arise. Catherine and Anne walked toward the library door together, their conversation continuing in quieter tones that Thomas couldn't overhear. The bond between them had been strengthened by the day's events, creating a foundation of trust and mutual respect that would serve them well during future difficulties. The castle around them continued its eternal rhythms, indifferent to human drama but providing a stable foundation for the lives lived within its walls. Windsor had sheltered the royal family for centuries, offering both physical security and the psychological comfort that came from connection to something larger and more enduring than individual concerns. The evening had brought an unexpected conclusion to what Thomas initially thought would be a routine day of royal protection duty. As the sun set over Windsor Castle's ancient walls, he found himself reflecting on the extraordinary events he had witnessed and the privilege of observing the royal family during moments of genuine human connection. Catherine and Princess Anne had parted ways after their library meeting, both departing for their respective evening commitments with the composed confidence that characterized their public appearances. The transformation Thomas had observed throughout the day, from morning crisis to afternoon resolution, demonstrated the remarkable resilience that royal life demanded and developed. Thomas had been reassigned to perimeter security for the evening's reception, a formal dinner hosted by other members of the royal family for visiting dignitaries. The event proceeded with the flawless precision that guests expected from royal hospitality, showing no signs of the morning's private drama. The ability to compartmentalize personal challenges while fulfilling public duties was one of the monarchy's most essential characteristics. From his position in the castle's east wing, Thomas could see the reception rooms glowing with warm light as guests arrived in formal attire. The contrast with the morning's intimate conversation in the morning room was striking. The same building, the same people, but an entirely different atmosphere and purpose. Royal life existed simultaneously on multiple levels, from deeply personal family moments to elaborate state ceremonies. A senior colleague approached Thomas's position, another veteran guard whose discretion and professionalism had earned him positions of trust within the royal protection system. The man nodded briefly, an acknowledgement between professionals who understood the unique responsibilities of their service. No words were exchanged about the day's events, none were necessary or appropriate. The castle grounds were illuminated by carefully positioned lights that enhanced the ancient architecture while providing security coverage. Thomas could see other guards at their assigned positions, creating an invisible network of protection that allowed the royal family to conduct their lives with relative normalcy despite constant security concerns. The system operated with quiet efficiency, drawing strength from years of refinement and the dedication of its members. Through the reception room windows, Thomas glimpsed Catherine moving gracefully among the guests, her earlier distress completely invisible beneath the polished facade of the Princess of Wales. Her ability to present a composed public image regardless of personal circumstances was remarkable, reflecting years of training and the inner strength that had carried her through numerous challenges. Princess Anne was visible as well, engaging with dignitaries with the authoritative presence that made her such an effective representative of the royal family. The Princess Royal's crisis management skills had been proven once again through the day's events, demonstrating why family members consistently turned to her during difficult periods. Her network of contacts and decades of experience had proved decisive in neutralizing a serious threat. The peacocks had settled for the night somewhere in the castle grounds, their day of magnificent display concluded. Thomas found himself thinking about the birds as metaphors for royal life, beautiful and impressive when observed from a distance, but complex and occasionally challenging when encountered up close. The royal family faced similar dynamics in their relationship with public attention and private reality. A discreet communication through his earpiece updated Thomas on the evening's security status. All sectors were secure, all protocols were functioning normally, and the reception was proceeding without incident. The professional language of security operations provided a reassuring constant amid the day's emotional complexities. Some things remained predictable and manageable even when others seemed chaotic. Thomas's thoughts returned to the morning's conversation between Catherine and Anne. The vulnerability he had witnessed in the Princess of Wales had been genuine and affecting, showing the human costs of constant public scrutiny. The photographs that had triggered the crisis represented a violation of privacy that went beyond professional concerns to touch on fundamental questions of dignity and family security. Anne's response had been swift, comprehensive, and devastatingly effective. The Princess Royal possessed resources that few people could imagine, accumulated through decades of building relationships with security professionals, legal experts, and media executives. Her ability to mobilize these resources while maintaining her regular schedule demonstrated remarkable organizational skills and unshakable priorities. The resolution of the crisis had provided Thomas with insights into the royal family's crisis management capabilities that few people outside the inner circle ever witnessed. The combination of legal action, security intervention, and media negotiations had neutralized the threat while establishing protections against future similar situations. It was a masterclass in handling sensitive situations under pressure. A maintenance worker passed Thomas's position, making final checks on the exterior lighting systems. The man moved with the quiet efficiency that characterized all castle staff, understanding his role in maintaining the perfect presentation that guests expected from royal residences. Every member of the household, from senior officials to groundskeepers, contributed to the seamless operation that made royal life possible. The reception continued inside, generating the kind of positive coverage that balanced the royal family's public image against the constant threat of negative stories. Thomas understood that events like these were essential components of the monarchy's survival strategy, demonstrating relevance and accessibility while maintaining the dignity and mystery that made them unique institutions. Catherine's laughter drifted through the reception room windows, genuine and warm in a way that suggested her earlier fears had been completely resolved. The Princess of Wales had learned valuable lessons about both the vulnerabilities she faced and the resources available to address them. Her relationship with Anne had been strengthened by shared experience of crisis and resolution. Thomas checked his watch, noting the progress of the evening and calculating when the reception would conclude. Royal events operated according to precise timetables that balanced social expectations with security requirements and the royal family's need for private time. The discipline required to maintain such schedules while managing personal challenges was considerable. The library where Catherine and Anne had conducted their afternoon meeting remained dark and quiet, but Thomas knew it would forever be associated in his memory with the successful resolution of a serious threat to the royal family. The room's centuries of witness to royal conversations, strategic planning, and family discussions added weight to the day's events. A message on Thomas's secure communication device provided updates on the following day's security arrangements. Royal schedules continued their relentless advance, requiring constant coordination and preparation from the protection teams. Personal crises had to be managed efficiently to avoid disrupting the complex machinery of royal life. The evening air carried the scent of autumn leaves and the subtle fragrances from the castle gardens. Thomas had grown to appreciate these sensory details during his years of service, finding that attention to environmental factors enhanced both his security awareness and his connection to the historic locations where he worked. Windsor Castle possessed an atmosphere that was both magnificent and somehow comforting. Anne appeared briefly at one of the reception room windows, scanning the grounds with the practiced eye of someone who understood security requirements. The Princess Royal's military training had never left her, and she remained alert to potential threats even during social events. Her earlier success in managing Catherine's crisis had reinforced Thomas's respect for her capabilities and judgment. The peacock's cry echoed once more across the grounds, a final declaration before settling into nighttime silence. The sound had become a soundtrack to the day's events, marking different phases of the crisis and its resolution. Thomas would forever associate that distinctive call with the morning's tension, the afternoon's resolution, and the evening's restored normalcy. Inside the reception, the formal dinner was concluding with the customary toasts and diplomatic courtesies. Catherine and Anne stood together during the ceremonies, presenting the unified family front that was essential for maintaining the monarchy's strength and stability. Their private alliance, strengthened by the day's events, was invisible to the guests but clearly apparent to Thomas's trained observation. The success of Anne's intervention in Catherine's crisis had implications beyond the immediate family situation. The Princess Royal's network of contacts and crisis management capabilities represented valuable resources that the entire royal family could draw upon during future challenges. Her institutional knowledge and strategic thinking were essential components of the monarchy's survival strategy. Thomas prepared for the transition to night security arrangements as the reception began to conclude. Guests would depart according to careful protocol, while family members would retreat to their private quarters for the personal time that balanced their public obligations. The day's crisis had been resolved, but the ongoing work of royal protection continued without pause. As the evening wound down, Thomas reflected on the extraordinary privilege of witnessing the royal family during moments of genuine human drama. The vulnerability, strength, loyalty, and resilience he had observed provided insights into the people behind the public images that few outside the inner circle ever experienced. These private moments revealed the human foundations that supported the institution's public face. The castle around him continued its ancient rhythms, indifferent to human concerns but providing a stable foundation for the lives lived within its walls. Windsor had sheltered the royal family for centuries, witnessing countless private conversations, family crises, and moments of connection that shaped both individual lives and the monarchy's evolution. Catherine and Anne's day-long journey from crisis to resolution would never be recorded in official histories, but its importance to both women was undeniable. The bond between them had been tested and strengthened, creating a foundation of trust and mutual support that would serve them well during future challenges. The royal family's ability to protect and support its members remained one of its most essential characteristics. Thomas remained at his post as the last guests departed and the castle settled into nighttime quiet. His day of extraordinary observation was concluding, but the memories and insights he had gained would remain with him throughout his continued service to the crown. The privilege of protecting the royal family extended far beyond physical security to encompass the preservation of their privacy, dignity, and family bonds. The night air was crisp and clear, filled with the subtle sounds of the castle grounds settling into darkness. Thomas felt a deep sense of satisfaction about the day's events and his own role in maintaining the security and privacy that had allowed the royal family to address their crisis effectively. His service mattered, contributing to something larger and more enduring than individual concerns or challenges. As midnight approached, Thomas's shift was ending, but his commitment to the royal family's security and well-being continued. The day had provided him with renewed understanding of why his service was important and how the protection he provided supported not just individual safety but the stability and continuity of an institution that had evolved and endured for over 1,000 years.